All right. Thank you, Julian. Good morning, all. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the West Haven Subcommittee of the MARB. Today is Thursday, June 9th, and the time is 10:03. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. I'm Kimberly Kennison. I'm the designee for Secretary Beckham. With me today is Christine Shaw, who is the designee for Treasurer Wooden. I have a small opening remark just to let the members be aware that today many of the materials didn't come in all at once, and so as we go through this agenda today, some of these materials were just sent out as of yesterday, such as a revised agenda, and Julian's kind hard work of pulling together some notes for us on the 5-year plan and the summary of the budget and of their FY23 budget, as well as the minutes. Those minutes were sent out to you, though, prior, as we thought that we were going to have this meeting at another time and earlier in this month, but we had changed that meeting and rescheduled it a couple of times just to provide sufficient time for the City of West Haven to provide the MARB members with a complete package of their information. But some of those items were still coming in towards the last minute. I'm going to apologize if I am clumsy today. I do not have my full packet in front of me with some of the last materials, and so I am looking at multiple places to get the information, some on the computer and some in hard copy in front of me. So I will bear with me as I get through this, and hopefully I won't be too clumsy.
Kim, not to interrupt, but
yeah.
As we go, since we have received, which it is difficult to read all this.
Yes.
If you could just be specific on which revised revision of the revision that we're looking at.
Definitely. And as well as, Stephen, what we're going to do is in some of the materials, it might be easier for Julian to help and share some of them at that time, so it makes it easier for you to see it on screen. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Christine, anything else do you want to add to the opening remarks today?
No, thank you, Ms. Kennison.
Okay. All right, then the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from April the 26th. If I could get a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. How about a second, please? I need to mute people.
Seconded.
Thank you, Stephen. Any discussion?
Just a note, I'm going to abstain. I haven't had an opportunity to read the minutes. I don't know where they are in the pile.
Okay. That's fine. And if we feel that we don't have a quorum, then we can always pass on them to the next meeting. Your choice. But
when were they sent? I'm going to try to find them. The revised thing.
Sure. Yeah, yesterday. Go ahead.
Yeah, yesterday at 4 o'clock.
But
so again, if there hasn't been sufficient time to review them, we could table it.
We can table. Christine, you were going to say something.
Yes, just a point of order. If we have a quorum for the meeting, we don't need a quorum for the vote on the minutes. Okay. An abstention counts as
it's fine. Right. No, I meant for if everybody wasn't comfortable with the fact that they just went out late. All right. No other discussion? All right.
If you prefer tabling the minutes,
I can do that.
I will withdraw my second.
I'm not willing. I don't prefer it. Mr. White is the only one so far. Let's see if we can how the other members feel about this. Okay. All in favor? Can I get an aye? Aye.
His second was withdrawn, so it needs to be seconded by someone else.
Sorry, so I didn't know. I thought he was questioning it. I didn't think it was.
I'll defer to Mr. White if it's. I mean, I think everybody should have and that's some of our problems in the past. But I think everybody needs to be able to have the
Okay.
time to read it. So if Mr. White would like me to not second, I will, and give him an opportunity.
No, go ahead. Move along. I'm reading it. I'm reading it now. It's just that it was a pretty important meeting,
Yeah.
and I want to make sure stuff. I have notes, and I want to make sure stuff is in there, and I haven't had time to do it. So I'm going to abstain. If you want to go ahead, I am concerned that there is some information here might be missing. But
then I'll withdraw my second.
All right. Then let's vote to table.
Point of order, you can't withdraw a second. A motion's been made, it's been seconded, it's before the body. Unless there's been an amendment to the original motion, the seconder can withdraw. So I think we should just go ahead. We're talking about minutes. If people don't want to vote for it, it'll go down. If they do, it'll pass and we can move forward with business.
Thank you, Patrick. No. I am in favor of the minutes. Are you going to keep your second? He did make the motion.
Yeah, I mean, I as according to Mr. Egan, I can't withdraw it, so.
Okay. I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Patrick.
And might I add, I agree with Mr. White about the importance of that meeting. And I did have an opportunity to review the minutes, and there were I know there was a lot of discussion, particularly around the connection between the police contract and the proposed budget, and wanting to make clear that the action or no action on the police contract had nothing to do with contract itself. But I feel like the minutes effectively capture that. At the end of the day, I'm grateful that these meetings are recorded because that does represent a fulsome account of the matters that were discussed. So I personally take comfort in that.
Thank you. Mr. White, I'm putting you down as abstaining because I heard that already.
That's correct.
And Mr. Hamilton.
Tom Hamilton's, yeah, I'm a yes. I'm on the phone. My internet seems to be on the fritz here, so. But
Thank you.
Yes.
And Stephen.
Yes.
Okay. All right. The motion passes and the minutes have been approved. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an update on the fiscal year 2021 audit. You'll recall at the May 17th MARB meeting that the city had informed us that PKF O'Connor Davies has been appointed the auditors, and we were looking for an update as far as the engagement letter, a schedule of the audit to start, or a timeline. If the city could give us an update, that would be helpful.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, they have signed on. The council has approved the FY21 and the FY22 contract. Mr. Centofanti has already reached out to our assistant finance director, gathering information. We don't have a timeline yet, but as soon as we do, but they are actively starting it so that we can get it finished and then be on to 22 before you know it.
Okay.
Yeah, so the contract has been settled. The initial interrogatories have been issued, and so we were working on it.
So the engagement letter's been signed, or no? That's being worked on.
I think it was. Honestly, I would have to go and look because I signed at a SEF, but it definitely was approved by the city council. That I do know.
Okay. So one of my questions that I had asked previously at the last meeting was to see if you were going to inquire on, rather than a standard audit, that you were going to ask them to do a little deeper dive in the audit and consider the IT part of it. I'm wondering if any of that was included.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to take a look at the contract, but it is, frankly, it's a significant increase in cost So
Okay.
the understanding of the, of the on the ground circumstances was certainly incorporated in the presentation by the vendor.
Okay.
But it's specifically IT that you're requesting?
Well,
additional-
I had, it's about time for the IT to be re-looked at again from the prior time that it was audited. And the second thing was looking for a deeper dive in the actual audit rather than a regular standard audit. When we're done, we can come back to this, and maybe it'd be possible if I could have a copy maybe of the engagement letter.
Absolutely. We have to submit that to the state of Connecticut to OPM. So it will be it will be there shortly.
Thank you so much.
Already.
Okay. All right. Next item. Any questions about the audit from the board members? All right. I hear none. The next item on the agenda is to review, discuss, and possible action on the 5-year plan we're going to start with today. This is the first time that the city has submitted the 5-year plan to us, and that just came to us on Tuesday, June the 7th. You'll recall that absence of the 5-year plan, that one of the reasons why the board was did not approve. We actually disapproved the fiscal year 2023 budget at the May meeting because it was critical that we did have a 5-year plan. And so therefore, today we'll ask the city to come forth and walk us through their 5-year plan. The board is really looking for evidence today that the plan will be fully funded for the costs of the proposed police contract. And once the ARPA funding is no longer available, that was one thing that was very important to this board. And OPM, we will review the 5-year plan, and we will include. We included this distribution, just a write-up on this yesterday. Julian did that work so it will be helpful for this group. I may have Julian put that up because there are some tables included in the overall write-up that he provided. And then, but to get started, let's have the city walk us through their plan. Mayor, who will be presenting on your plan?
I'm going to speak briefly, but David Taylor has been very instrumental in making the changes and doing what's supposed to be. What I wanted to address was, yes, the 5-year plan does fully fund the police contract. It absolutely does. And as far as the ARPA money, you will see between FY24 and FY25, there is a significant increase, and it's two drivers. One is the $1.2 million, that is the $10,000 each officer will now be taken, out of the budget. And then the other driver is, as most of you know that have been on these meetings, the superintendent normally has been on them as well. And he had spoken at several meetings, I would say, that he did have the ESSER fund still, but when it came to a certain time, he may not, have this money, and that was something we needed to address. So I did have a very lengthy conversation in the last couple of weeks with the superintendent, and you will notice that there is another increase in that line, and that is for $1.3 million in 25 for the Board of Ed. $1.65 million, and that is 26, and $1.8 million in 27. He gave me his assurance that if other funding comes through, whether there's additional ESSER or any other type of funding, and he did not need that money, he would gladly give it back to the city. But for right now, I thought it was important that I reach out to him and get his thoughts and what he thought should be there. Okay.
Thank you.
So we did engage with a consultant to assist in the preparation of this document. It's a complicated animal, and so we do have our consultant David Taylor here with us today, and perhaps David can give a couple of minutes of overview, walk us through the chart. And then we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do you want to talk from there, David, or you want to come over here?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, David. Thank you.
That's good. Hello.
If there is a specific page that you're going to start on, we could actually show that to the group. Are you starting on page 1? Can you hear me, David? Can you hear me, Christine?
I can hear you.
All
I
right.
can hear you as well.
Okay. So would you like us to share some of the screen and the information with the members if we're starting on the 5-year plan? Or are you just going to take it from a high level?
Yeah, I would like documents put up on the screen that is being referenced by any speaker.
Julian, do you have the 5-year plan available?
It should be visible.
Yeah. Can you make it a little bigger? Thank you. Very good. Everybody can see this?
Yes, I can see it.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Stephen. All right. Who's going to walk us through this 5-year plan, please?
It's Mark. I can't, but I'm
Oh,
here for the ride.
okay.
That's all right. I have some questions later on. I'll worry about it later.
Thank you. If somebody's presenting, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry,
Now
we're
you're
muted.
Now you're good.
We were switching seats because I've had trouble signing on. I was across the room. So it's
Okay.
David Taylor. So yes, you have the mill rate calculation in front of you. As you can see there is growth in the mill rate year over year. Starting at 34 for the current budget, and then moving on to what is it, 3693 finally in 27. Some of this is on the strength of a very low expectation of growth in our levy, and the rest is through increase in expenses, as the mayor discussed. The drivers that we used on expenses were largely inflation rates provided by IMF that we found on the internet, and then the 2% raise for the general population of employees, and a 2.5% raise for the police officers through the period. I think the next page, if you page down.
Sure.
And I can only see a piece of this, but at the bottom, you'll see that there is every year a planned fund balance adjustment. So every year does also include additional monies being sacked away. In fact, over the period, it's $5.6 million.
Mm-hmm.
And we also took care to look at the relationship between fund balance and expenses to ensure that we did increase it, even though it's a very small amount, as you would imagine in 25, due to the increased costs of running the city in that year, as the ARPA funds run out and the Board of Education needs more money.
Okay.
So these are sort of the, the high level presentation of the plan and where it's going. If you have any questions, we're ready for you.
And so just to put a finer point on the police contract, that was obviously an issue of concern at the last meeting. And so the full appropriation of the funding necessary to complete that contract does show in the FY25 year. And it's also incorporated into the ADEC.
And that's falling under the public safety line? No, not the ADEC, the salaries.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And ready. Any questions from the board members?
Yeah, this is Mark. He don't need the interim now.
Oh, wait.
I don't.
Sorry, Mark, you're not able to see, but because
I can see it.
You can?
I can see.
Okay. You're
In the packet.
I understand. I don't want to be rude, Mark. I want to start with the board members because you're a guest, even though you are a full board member. And I see, no, I see that Bob White's hand is up, and I missed that because I wasn't looking up.
Okay, so those damn palm trees in your way. The couple things. I'm pleased you spoke with the superintendent. Are these increases acceptable to him at this point in time, with the notion that if he doesn't need it, he'll give it back?
Yes, Nancy Rossi, yes. And that was the agreement, that if we didn't need it, he would give it back. And absolutely, that's why I wanted to go directly to him, so I had accurate figures.
Good idea. Secondly, there's been this notion of 2% raises across the board. That includes non-union people.
When you say non-union people, we have people that follow the 1103 union, so they're technically not in the union, but the people that follow that contract, there's a resolution that has been passed by the council, several councils actually, that allowed them to get the same raises as the 1103 contract provides for the membership. We do have some part-time people now, and what we did was we put $1, I believe it was, David, right, in each.
In the first year, there's already a mandated raise for those who are on an hourly wage. So that is across the board in the first year of the 5-year plan. I'm sorry, I believe that was 2024. And all other years, we went ahead and budgeted for a 2% raise for all part-time workers through the period. Whether that happens or not, we just felt like it was prudent to budget for it.
All right, and that includes department heads.
Yes.
Yeah, department heads.
Yeah, it does. The department heads are the folks that the mayor was referring to, who follow the contract. That's to avoid a compression issue, where in at least 3 of the communities where I've worked, the deputies were making more than the department heads.
There was a question raised, I think, by Tom last time, that there were a lot of new positions being filled beyond the sort of the ones in the corner with procurement and all the ones we've been talking about for ages. How many new positions are there, and are there was that box in the corner on page God knows what. Are there any positions budgeted that are not on that little insert?
I don't know. Can we put that on the screen?
Thank you.
This doesn't have any budget. This doesn't have any.
Where was that? Can you put that on the screen? I just want to make sure we speak to it correctly.
Yeah, I think the reference is to a previous sort of summary document that's going to take me a few seconds
It would
to
be in the budget.
find, and it was
be the
based
budget. It would be the budget, not the 5-year plan.
right, and it was positions that were previously unfunded that are funded in FY23. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to try to.
We're doing good there. Okay. General fund.
So you should be seeing a different document now.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this was prepared in conjunction with the original budget proposal, and somewhere, and here it is.
There it is, right there.
There was this table reflected any position that was either new and funded in FY23 or may not have been a new position per se, but had been unfunded previously. So for example, there was a police captain slot that had existed but been unfunded for several years that was now funded in FY23. So that's what these additions refer to. And then there were some offsetting eliminations as well. So there were a handful of positions in here that being connected in one way or another to some of the improvements being made in the procurement function and finance and HR. And the titles of some of these may have been amended in some of the budget iterations since then. But this is the list from the original recommended.
Thank you, Julian. So my question is, are there any positions being funded in FY23 that are not on this list?
No, we've made no changes
Okay.
from the original submission.
So there's 9 people, some of which we've been talking about, and there's probably less than 5 previously unfunded positions that are now, that were I presume were vacant, and you intend to fill them this year. Is that correct?
There is, we are filling vacancies, yes.
Well, on this list.
Yes, but Bob, some of those positions were filled during part of the year and they were funded from other sources.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they're not unfunded. They were funded.
Some
Okay.
were temporarily funded this past year, like the procurement director position.
Okay, good. That's fine. That's
okay.
fine. I don't need to go any further.
Okay.
The 2 final things. One is we had talked last time about a charge back to the city on MARB funds that will be expended for consultants. And I forget, was it 3.1 or 3.9, Kim?
3.9.
3.9, and that we would sort of spread that out over time. We hadn't really talked about it. I didn't. My assumption here is that reimbursement is not in the 5-year plan. Correct?
Correct. I can answer that one. No, that is not in the 5-year plan because currently the MOA is on the city council agenda for the 13th, which will be Monday night for action. They have to approve the MOA with any and all of the conditions of the MOA. So that will be taken up on Monday night. I mean, I can report back to Julian on Tuesday morning to let him know what the status is. Additionally, we have talked about in finance and with Scott Jackson, as far as, because I believe in it's going to be passed in some shape or form. The 3.9, what happened in the past when we had money like that, it kind of skewed the numbers. And so Scott, remember you talked about like keeping it separate and not having it like in the regular operating budget?
Yes, so we're taking a different look at how some of these funds are received and booked. So, for example, this 3.9 that will come to us and in 10 seconds be turned back to the state. We don't want to sort of obliterate the historical record on that, and so we're gonna keep those off to the side.
Okay, no, the one-time transaction, I understand, that's fine. What I was talking about is that there was conversation that you, as money was spent, you would reimburse on a timeline. Not all, you know, if we spent 2 million next year, you might be asked to, you know, spend to reimburse 500, and then, you know, we would spread it out over a number of years. I think this board has to figure out what that is, but it sounds like that is not included, and it should be in some amount. And I think we probably should at this meeting give some comments that.
Mr. White, it is included in the MOA of how long they have to return to pay back the funding.
This MOA that you're talking about was
yes, yes, the one that we
talked about a couple of weeks ago, but we didn't fill in what the repayment plan was, did we? I don't remember.
It has been filled in order to execute the contract.
And
so
what was
it, Julian, do you recall?
Filled in?
I'm sorry.
I thought it was $1 million a year.
So
they had
the timeline is, it's really actually a very quick timeline, and it's all done in one installment so that the funds are readily available.
No. I'm not talking about
payback.
The initial.
The
I'm not
payback.
talking about the payback. As we expend, we're going to get paid back over time. And there was a placeholder in the MOA that we talked about a while ago, and it did not say how that would be. In fact, I think we had to add that it would be paid back, and we never said it would be paid back over, 4 years or 8 years or whatever. That's what I'm talking. I'm not talking about the one-time transaction.
You're correct. Yes, I'm trying to remember.
I'm trying to remember too. I thought it was like,
I believe it was 10 years, but
that's what I thought was 10 years.
Back.
You don't remember the board discussing that.
I do remember the board discussing that now.
Yes.
I remember discussing the principle, not the
principle. Right, exactly. And I believe.
Yeah, okay, well, my question has to do with the time.
Yes.
And my current understanding is the board has not acted on the time.
That's consistent with my understanding.
Yeah, right here.
Okay, so we need to do that so they can plug it in going forward. And again, I'm not talking about the one, which I understand creates problems. It sounds like they're handling it correctly. Okay, let's put that on the agenda. My last question, and I apologize for taking up so much time, is the last time we were here, we concluded the budget was unbalanced because it did not take into consideration the increased ADAC. And if I understand the initial page on the proposed changes, that the net effect is somehow there was a decrease, I guess, that there million increase, but I know Milliman came back and overestimating or whatever. So am I correct that the new ADAC which includes the raise is 1.2? Is that right? Or that want to figure out how you balance the budget that was unbalanced?
It's 2.3.
Yeah, no, it's
2.3.
Yeah, from a
2.3.
it reduced from 3.6 to 2.3.
Yeah, I believe the 1-2 you're referring to is the change.
Mhm.
This is Tom Hamilton. Can I ask a follow-up question on that, Kim?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I looked at the updated letter from Milliman. There are a couple of interesting things in there. One, it looked like, well, they presented both a scenario 1 and scenario 2, and scenario 1 was essentially the $10,000 raise, which immediately sort of flowed through to the retirees in the form of a COLA on the 50% of the dollar amount. And scenario 2 appeared to be some sort of potential proposal to sort of recategorize that $10,000, a portion of it being a bonus, and then part of it being a raise, and then it would sort of step down each year over 5 years, if I understood it correctly, so that essentially it sort of spread out the impact and muted the impact on the retiree COLA provision. And for whatever reason, it looked like you guys stuck with scenario 1 rather than scenario 2. So I'd like to understand the thinking there. Why didn't you choose scenario 2, which seemed like it would have had some positive financial impact on your budget during this 5-year period? And then it also looked like you extended the amortization period, and there were several options that Milliman had presented, and it appeared to me that you extended it from 9 years to 10 years on the amortization, and they had presented, several different options, including up to, I think, 13 years, 15 years, or maybe more than that. But you opted to just extend it to 10 years. And I'm just interested in, the thinking on, why you felt that was the right thing to do, and why was that the right years the right extension period to choose on that amortization period?
Well, Nancy Rossi. So one of the reasons was after the last meeting, we got everybody in the room. Jen Castellano from Milliman, the police department, several stakeholders were in the room to try to iron all of this out and find out what the right thing to do, because we were kind of blindsided at the last meeting because we thought it was all set, and then we got the actuarial study. I got it right in the middle of the meeting. I think Scott Jackson did as well, and we saw the problems. So we had Jen Castellano, who is on this call, come to the meeting, and we sat there for like 2.5 hours to go through everything. And there were some assumptions that were not valid or correct, and she can better go into, there were a few of them, and clear all of that part up. But as the city, we looked at the scenarios, and the reason we picked scenario 1 is because that was always the original offer. We have been negotiating it for several months. We had it signed, the contract. It had a unanimous approval from the city council. So it was, to me, always, I thought that was the best option. Scenario 2 had a lot of questions, and it was basically moving by $2,000 from one pot to the other during the course of it. This is a more straightforward. As far as the amortization period, it seemed to go with the 10 years. And the reason we did that, our financial advisor who was in the room, our investor, I should say, Dave Moran, said, if you go to 15 years, it's kind of like refinancing your house when, for 15 years. And so we had, as I said, a lot of discussion. We had a lot of people in this room. And scenario 1 is what everyone thought was the right thing to do to go forward. And I'm hoping that this board agrees, because I think it's very important that we, go forward with the scenario 1 to the police department, make them whole, because July 1st of 23 is literally around the corner now. and make sure that we retain our excellent officers in the city of West Haven. And I'm going to let Scott Jackson and David, if they need to weigh in.
Yeah, I'm hovering over the mayor. So,
that's okay. They can't see us.
Sometimes, we lose the track as to what we're trying to do. This is not a financial exercise, it's a public safety exercise. And the city sees itself in peril here. And so we floated the idea and asked for numbers on what you see as scenario 2, but that is very hard to explain to a recruit who's going to post. That maybe you'll get another $2,000 a year, maybe you'll get a bonus, but it's not really guaranteed in any specific way. And so in order to do, and we've changed our language to be consistent in retention and recruitment, in order to attain those goals, scenario 1, even when we bounced it off of all of the lawyers, all the actuaries, the union, the police brass, scenario 2 wasn't really a starter.
So scenario 2 would have required, I'm assuming, reopening this agreement with the bargaining group, and would have required essentially renegotiating the deal. And is that correct?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
Whereas scenario 1 is essentially what the deal was in the original agreement. It's just the extension of the amortization period, which is essentially that's totally within the control of the city, not something the collective bargaining group would get involved with.
Correct.
Okay. And so if the actuary is on the line, can she just chime in on the amortization period? I mean, I don't see it as a big deal to go from, it seemed like it was currently 9 years was left on the amortization, so you're only adding 1 year to it, which I don't think is all that material, but I guess I'd like to hear from the actuary if she's on the line.
I agree with you. Jen, are you on the line?
Yes, Jen Castellano from Milliman right here.
Thank you, Jen. I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, so switching to the 10-year amortization period is something that we would have discussed with the city anyways when we did the July 1st, 2022 valuation. Dropping below an amortization period of 10 years is not recommended because it introduces a significant amount of volatility into the contribution amount, because each year we're amortizing any adverse conditions or any gains or losses. So to the extent investments underperform or overperform, or the liability moves in a way that is not expected, we have to amortize that over this remaining period. And as that period gets shorter and shorter, you have a shorter period of time to smooth out any unexpected events. So what we would have done anyways is talk about resetting to 10, potentially introducing layered bases. There's a variety of options that we could discuss with the city when the time comes, but moving to 10 is definitely a reasonable assumption, and it's a prudent one.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
John.
I had another unrelated question. I think the only thing that really, and what I do want to, commend the city, for getting this plan together. I do think, we now have something that's, we can discuss, and people may have different opinions, but at least we've got something on the table. And, I think, I want to thank them for that and appreciate that. But one of the items that I think was noted in Julian's write-up as well is debt service drops off significantly, especially in the last 2 years of the plan. And apparently the assumption is that the city is not going to be funding capital improvements with new debt going forward for at least, other than the item, I guess, that's now on the agenda, and funding the remaining piece of the high school project. It looks like the intention here is to essentially not fund any additional debt or not issue any additional debt over the next 5 years. So I want to just hear from the city what is the plan, or is there a plan to address the capital needs of the city? Because obviously, any municipality, school district is going to have ongoing needs to invest in infrastructure and so on. So I'd just kind of like to hear the thought or the thinking on how that's going to meet the city's capital needs over the next number of years.
Okay, Nancy Rossi. So for FY23, we did fund it correctly, and what it takes, I believe there's $15.9 million, which is final payment for the new high school, and also we are redoing Washington School, which is 109 years old and very antiquated, as you might guess. So those two payments, and then on the city side, the remainder between the 21 and the 15 million will be going for infrastructure, whether it be public works, park and rec, or different improvements. That being said, for whatever reason, it wasn't in the out years, which Julie and I have talked about it again, even this morning. Our intent is to correct that. I totally agree with you that we need to fund projects, not only for the Board of Ed, but for the city, for the police department. So we are going to revise that ASAP, because I do agree. We do have a 5-year capital plan as well that outlines, what our intent. Doesn't mean we're always going to fund it in whatever year. Is our intent. And I have Scott here if he wants to add anything.
Yeah, just one quick item is that our sewer infrastructure is paid in large measure through the sewer fees. So it's a little bit outside of the debt service schedule because it is on the operating side on the sewer fund. But there is also there are additional holdbacks for the out years, and I'm talking specifically 25 and beyond. But they're not project based. They start from the capacity side as opposed to the project side. So there are increases in debt service where you think that they would be falling off, but they increase. So in the original construction of the budget, there was certainly a contemplation of additional financing.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is when I look at this 5-year plan and I see, for instance, the number in 25, you've got debt service at 14,822, and then dropping to 11,747, and then the year after that to 9,394. That at least those last 2 years are not accurate numbers. Is that correct? That you expect your debt service is not going to drop by $3 million and then another $2.5 million. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Hamilton. You are absolutely correct on that. No, we are going to fund, because as I said, every year you don't want to save it all for 1 year. You want to spread it over, obviously, the 5 years, and we're going to do projects in those 2 years.
So it's really not the projects that you're doing in those years. It's really the overall capital plan and the expected financing. When is that financing going to hit, and when is the repayment going to hit? So really, what I think we need to see is the capital plan and specifically the financing plan associated with that capital plan. And that then needs to be layered into these debt service projections. I mean, that's a pretty material omission, frankly. So I do think that needs to be corrected before we vote on this, at least in my judgment. But again, I think this is good progress, but I'm not sure that it's quite where it needs to be. I think that financing plan for your 5-year capital budget or 5-year capital plan needs to be layered into this model.
Okay.
Agree. I see two other hands up, but I did want to piggyback off of two comments that were made. One was on staffing, and you had stated in staffing, it includes all those new positions for FY23. Does this plan include any other positions in 24 through 27?
It does not. There are two positions being contemplated to be grant funded, but not within the general fund.
Okay. I can't remember the second question that I had at this moment, but it will come back to me. Stephen, I believe that Mr. Falsigno, I think that your hand was up first. So
thank you. So I think I don't follow, and it's really, I think it's hard for me to vote for something that I haven't had time to analyze. To receive this daunting file on the 8th for a meeting on the 9th is, I think it's unfair and not reasonable for us to be able to analyze this. But as I look at these numbers, I picked up on the same thing Mr. Hamilton did about the debt service, that you have zero debt service. The other thing I find hard to swallow is the proposed updated plan on page 8, where your fund balance goes from 6 million in 2022 to almost 12 million in 27. So I mean, I'm not sure how you do that. I mean, that's pretty good if you can. I just don't, I look at the numbers and I have a tough time rationalizing it, for lack of a better term. I myself need a lot more time to analyze this 5-year budget, and to omit or to even think that we're not going to ask the question about the 5-year plan in the 4th and 5th year with the debt service, I think is unreasonable to think that that's not something that should be put into this budget. And to omit that in those 2 years, to have the numbers suggest something very, very different than what they actually are, I find a little difficult to agree to or to even accept. So I personally think this needs to be tabled and brought to the full MARB next week, and with accurate debt service plans and with actual ideas that they have in the later years in this budget.
I just want to piggyback off of that one comment, and I agree with both Mr. Hamilton as well as Mr. Falsigno to make you aware that in the past, if you looked at last year's 5-year plan, there was a 4-page debt schedule that was included in the past, and it is omitted this year, or it hasn't been built yet. So it would be helpful if that gets provided to this committee. And Stephen, are you finished with your questions? Because I have 2 other people with hands up.
Yes, that's
okay. It. Christine, you're next.
Thank you, Ms. Kennison. I'd like some insights into the kind of variability with the tax revenue growth. You know, it looks like for the recommended budget for fiscal 23, growth is assumed at 0.5%, but then it goes as high as 4% in fiscal 25. Can we get some insight into the assumptions that have went into those projections, and are they good numbers?
Well, it's David Taylor. They're beautiful numbers. The growth factor that we assumed after the huge growth on motor vehicles in 22, 23 was 1% per year. The growth factor used for real estate personal property on the existing rolls was 0.5%. Not, no, it's a 0.5%. And then there are a number of properties, 3 schools in particular that are in the act of being sold. And these then properties are assumed to come back on the rolls in 25. And then there's the Haven project, which I imagine you are all aware of, which had previously shown to come back on the rolls and be a rather large $10 million increase to the list. I believe it was in 25, but we've actually pushed that out to 26. And then a couple of other projects that are also on there that are smaller.
So certainly the big drivers David identified, the Haven being the biggest of those projects, which I think rationally pushed out. But the sale of the schools will have a material impact on the grant list.
All right, I'm looking at a
Thank you.
different chart. I'm looking at a chart which is captioned mill rate calculation. And there are different percentages there for, it's at the very bottom, tax revenue growth. That's really the
Right
set
here?
of, yes. Those were the set of figures that are driving my questions here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are the underlying assumptions to drive those numbers.
So can I jump in just for a sec?
Yes, please, Julian.
So the tax revenue growth in addition to being pushed a bit by driven growth in the grand list, that's also the year that the large impact on the police salaries plays into on the expenditure side, and the city then programmed in at least by this 5-year plan standards, a larger mill rate increase. So it's a function of a bit more grand list growth than the sort of core 0.5%, but also 1.4 mil increase.
Yes,
Thank you.
Julian,
See
one of the other drivers, if I could add, is that is the year in which the Board of Ed starts to take increases as well.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen, your hand's still up. You're finished, right?
Sorry, I apologize.
You're fine.
Let me lower it.
Hold on. Let me see whose hand is up here because I can't read it. It says it's in the grouping. I'm guessing it's Patrick.
It is, thank you.
There you go.
I had 2 questions. One with the Board of Ed. So for 23 and 24, they're basically flat funded.
Yes.
And there's no projection of any increase in costs for the Board of Education?
No, I know that the superintendent has other sources, ESSER funds, and we've actually been flat funded for, this is, I want to say, the 3rd year, possibly. Not all the years, but the 3rd year. And he was able to, with the additional funding he had received, to be able to take care of FY23 and FY24. It's only when it hits FY25 that he's concerned that he won't get that funding. And that's when he gave me the numbers for 25, 26, and 27 that he felt was reasonable.
And 24 hours ago or 25 hours ago, I reconfirmed those numbers with the superintendent, and he felt that they were good numbers.
Okay. My second question is for employee insurance for fiscal year 23. I think I'm reading this correctly. It appears there's, what is it, about a little less than a 5% increase? Goes from 18.7 to 19.6.
Do you have a page that you're on so we can share that, Patrick?
I'm on, let me see.
Sorry.
That's all right. Page 6.
Thank you. Julian, thank you.
Can't see my page numbers.
I know.
That says 5, but is that 6?
No, hold on, I'm looking
Okay.
at.
No,
Here,
I'm on,
yeah, it's here.
it's in this category. If you can see the line
Yeah.
that's highlighted, it's called operating charges in the document. It really $19.7 in FY22 to $19.6 in FY23, and that sort of includes health insurance benefits for retirees and actives. It includes the pension contribution. It includes liability and property insurance.
so there, it bumps up about 900,000 for fiscal 23, which is about, say, 5%. And then it bumps up, it looks like over 10% for fiscal 24.
Mhm.
Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Where are we getting our numbers where there's only a 5% increase for 23, but then a plus 10 for 24?
Those are driven in large part by medical benefits, and so those are the projections given to us by our consultants at Lockton.
And one other thing is the impact of the additional ADEC for the police contract hits in FY24. So that is reflected in that year that has the larger increase of 10% or so.
Thank you.
That number includes
The police.
the ADAC?
Yes.
Oh, that one does, yes.
Okay, so with the ADEC number taken out of that, if we're just looking at employee insurance, what's the projection, I guess, to put it simply, of employee insurance next year is projected to increase for fiscal year 23, is projected to increase by what percentage?
We have a nice table in the back, I think, of each one of the sheets. I don't know what 23 is though, but I see 24, 25, 26. Those are all on page 26 of this 5-year plan.
Excuse
Is the
me, it's
detail?
Mark. Look at page 23. It's right on 23. It's 5.7% increase.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark, sorry, I have not forgot about you.
All right, so it's a 5.7.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
And they're comfortable with those numbers? I mean, it seems great if it would only increase that much. What's been the increase of the previous 5 years? Do we know?
It's one of the questions I was going to ask. The table to give us a 5-year look
Okay.
back, historical increases.
We don't have that available, but we can get that to you pretty expeditiously.
Thank you.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Any other questions? Mark, I think you're next.
Yeah. First of all, the police contract. Let's come to I don't want to say reality, but the police contract is in existence for another year. There is no need to renegotiate. You have a 2.5% increase already negotiated for next year. For whatever reason, both parties chose to renegotiate a new contract in the middle of an existing contract that calls for a 10% base increase plus 2.5%, which is about a 13% increase for each employee, not counting increments. And I object to to Scott's characterization of it being in peril. We have cities right now that are, one of which we agreed to an MOU in the middle of a contract to attract and retain, and they have a 25% vacancy rate. You have a less than 10% vacancy rate. But I fully understand the necessity to increase employee benefits. Being a labor negotiator, I think that the difficulty in West Haven is self-induced, self-inflicted wounds rather than anything else. But that said, my advocacy it still is that you do a one-year MOU and negotiate a meaningful contract over the next 3 years. That is a recruit contract rather than just throwing $10,000 out there that enhances retiree benefits for 142 employees of $6,000 apiece. That said, I just have a series of questions that I would need for the next MARB meeting to be answered rather than, because I don't expect you to know them now. I have a document in front of me. It's from a previous meeting that gives the fund year balances from 1990 to 2020. And it clearly shows that something happened in 1992. And I'm looking for institutional knowledge. I don't expect Scott to know this, or maybe even the mayor. But it went from a general fund balance of 37,000 to a deficit of 17 million. And then the state stepped in the first time, eradicated that, and you ended up similarly now where you had a $4 million plus. And I think Tom was on that one. 2004, when you went from a $9 million surplus in the general fund to a $3 million deficit, and then it continued to be in deficit until 2017, where it is 18 million, at which the state interceded again. So you're the only community that's been under state supervision twice. And if somebody for the next meeting or in a memo to Julian or Kim can communicate to me at least what the driving forces were for such a large, unusual swing between a general fund balance to a minus balance of 17 and 18 million, where the state had to step in to save the city and or to save the city. That's number one. The second one is on the, Milliman is on the line, I know, but the assumption on scenario one, which is the existing COLA for retirees. First of all, you can't negotiate for retirees, it's against the law. So the retiree benefits cannot be adjusted, even if you want to do scenario two. You can't negotiate with actives that affect retirees. So unless you did a bonus concept, which they were trying to put forward, and I don't even know if that's legal. But, and they do say in their letter, Milliman says in their letter, in their scenarios, they did not check out the legality of their scenarios. The $10,000 increase is not figured into the COLA for the post-1993 hires. It's 1.25%. It's 50% of the 2.5. If I were retiring in West Haven, I would go to court saying that the 10,000 is part of the general wage increase, because the 10,000's got to be something. It's not an increment. It's a base salary increase. And if you add that base salary increase percentage-wise and add, as it says in your proposal, 2.5%, it comes out to be about a 14-point-something%. Half of that's 6 or 7%, depending upon the position that the retiree held at the time of retirement. So it's not, the ADEC would be an error for those that are on the percentage increase, not the dollar amount increase. If you included the $10,000 as a percentage, not just the 2.5. And I would certainly, as a retiree, probably retain a lawyer to argue that I should be given 50% of the 10,000. I mean, yes, the 10,000 should be converted to a percentage, et cetera. That said, can you provide the MARB, seeing as how you're voluntarily going into some contractual negotiations, with the salary increases for each individual, dollar amount and percentage amount, no names. There's 103 of them, with your proposed increase over the 5-year period, because I'm not sure that the numbers add up. And also the impact, I don't know if Millman would need to do that, on the retirement benefits in dollars and percentages for both groups. Not arguing the 10,000 being part of the base pay. That'll be a legal question that if a retiree chooses to go to court and sue the town for it. So that's what I would need to see if it can be done by the 15th. The historical increase of healthcare Pat referenced from 22 to 23 was 5.7%. The state partnership plan that now is in play with the, and I'm not talking about retirees, because personally, I don't trust locked-in numbers. That's a separate issue. State partnership plan increases, your assumption is, I believe, 7% over the 5 years annually. Could you please show, or as Scott said, it's easy enough to get what those percentages have been in the state partnership plan over the past X amount of years. I mean, plus you're going to be adding new people into your workforce, which is going to cause an increase in healthcare costs anyway. But at least from a premium share perspective, 7% doesn't appear to be too outlandish, but I'd still like to see what the trend has been within the state partnership plan over the past 5 years, which you probably could get from the state. And lastly, the Board of Ed came up with a $2 million surplus this year to turn back to the town. And I get the idea that he's operating with grants. So he's supplanting, Scott, I assume what he's done is supplanted the local tax dollars with state and federal dollars and is turning back the local dollars to the city. And he intends to do that over the next 2 years, I think, at which time he doesn't believe he can supplant anymore, and he would need to have an increase. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to characterize it, but and so in your industry, Mr. Waxenberg, you certainly know that one of the biggest drivers of Board of Ed costs are things like outplacements for special ed and transportation. Yeah. And when you are not running buses after school for a year and a half, you end up with a surplus in that account, and it's material to your operations. So I don't want to characterize them, and I don't think that Superintendent Cavallaro is on the call, but there are certain fairly sizable cost drivers that provided that surplus, and I wouldn't want to speak to him. I wouldn't feel comfortable saying there's a supplanting, but there are certain cost drivers.
Yeah, agreed. And you make a very good point. During the pandemic period, transportation and special ed costs. Well, I don't know about special ed costs, but certainly transportation would be something. But it's just
Mark.
Yes.
Mark, you will recall that also they switched to the partnership plan and was expecting to have some savings in that area too. I just want to bring that to your attention.
Good. I would like to have some understanding of where that large amount of surplus came from the board. Not that it's of any consequence, but the mayor has talked and Scott has talked to the superintendent who feels comfortable with the flat funding. Hartford's been flat funded for years and basically operates on state and federal grants, so and outside resources. So I guess it's similar, but hopefully the questions that I've asked can be provided. But as I said before, just in my closing, as a member of MARB, not necessarily the subcommittee, when somebody says police contract, I think of it as being a contract that's going to expire. And when the mayor says it's of urgency, there is no urgency. It's an urgency that they have developed based on what they perceive to be a need to recruit and retain that I am certainly not convinced of for a variety of reasons that I won't get into here. But renegotiating a contract out for 3 years rather than coming up with an MOU for 1 year is quite different. And lastly, are you aware, and Scott would know this, and maybe OPM, are we aware of any other community that has used ARPA money for the purposes of salary increases for any employee group? I'm not talking about retain and retention bonuses, because I know towns are doing that. As a matter of fact, we've agreed with some of it. But to incorporate ARPA money into a existing salary schedule, are we aware of any city and or other town that has done that? I mean, certainly of the towns that we oversee, it hasn't happened. But
Correct.
I just would wonder if OPM is aware, or Scott
We are.
would be aware, or the mayor.
Yeah, we are not aware of it, and I can tell you that the state isn't getting some of that information, as that money that is going directly to the towns from an ARPA perspective.
Okay.
I am also unaware, Mr. Waxenberg, which is why we sought legal counsel on this to dig in and provide us with an opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it's illegal. The question is whether it's fiscally astute or not, because in the end, the taxpayer's picking up millions of dollars of contractual expenses that previously were funded by federal funds. And the question is not that they should get the benefit. The question is it well thought out to recruit and retain? As I said the last time, New Haven has a pension system, which unfortunately you chose, when I say you, West Haven, chose to give up. New Haven pays more money, has a pension system, and they're 25% loss, and they have a 25% vacancy rate, 400 staff, 300 actuals. Hartford, without violating any confidences, has a pension plan that has decided to modify it to attract and retain new hires. You are not in any position to do that. So I guess the only position you have is money. And I question whether money is a driver to retain new employees. Giving $10,000 to a person that's making $90,000 is not going to retain them. And then lastly, if you look at the end of Milliman's documents they sent to us, I don't know if any other board members have seen it. You've got a 58-year-old individual making $99,000 in benefits, and according to this, you're going to give that individual a $6,000 raise. I don't know if the taxpayers of West Haven or the taxpayers of Hartford, of the state, would consider that a wise use of local tax dollars. And believe me, I'm an advocate of retirees, being one myself, but I'm just not sure that's appropriate. So that said, I look forward to your responses. Thank you.
Kim, am I allowed to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Waxenberg. Yes, you can, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Waxenberg, for what you have outlined. We're going to have to agree to disagree. I still believe there is an urgency. And the reason I say that is because I go to the police commission meetings when available, but at the very least, I get the police commission agenda with the packets. It's very rare now that we don't have an officer leaving. And the reason in their exit interview is because they're not paid the same as other municipalities, and they have families and bills and everything else. And as much as they would love to stay here, They can't. In fact, since the last meeting, I know another one, if not one or two, we're thinking of two, were left after the last meeting because they were afraid that, you know, we weren't going to honor any of this and go forward with it. And so they went to other municipalities. So again, I am very concerned. We have crime here, as you know, and I know all communities. And I also want to point out that so far, and our residents are not bashful by any means, and there's been a lot of council meetings and public input. And if anything, there's been overwhelming support for this and for our police officers to get increases so that they stay here. And a lot of them still do live here, not all, but a lot of them do stay here in our community because they're here, they're known, they work well, they're hard workers, and they all speak highly of the police department. As far as the ARPA, I haven't checked either, but now you've sparked my curiosity, so I absolutely will. But I do know that what we wanted to make sure, and we did get documentation, is that that was an intended use for ARPA money that you can to retain. So it is a perfectly legal use. Once again, the council has embraced and I believe unanimously approved the $1.2 million for FY23 and FY24. And again, we have an excellent police force. We don't want to lose any more of our policing. And I understand other communities may be different, and that's fine. But our community wants to retain our police officers. Thank you.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
Mark, are you looking to respond
I don't
or no?
understand something. I'm not being an advocate. I realize that the recruitment and retention of police is as important as fire and education and police for safety purposes. What I am saying is, if you really want to get into the retainment and the recruitment, you're not giving $10,000 to a person that's already making $100,000. That person's not leaving. You yourself said that. Has anybody done an analysis of where you have where the officers are leaving? They're probably leaving within the first 5 years, if it's that quote unquote severe. And I believe it is, because, as I said, it's a self-inflicted wound. You were taken over by the state twice. You're the only community that's done that. The poor employees had to suffer because of the mismanagement of the town. But that said, has anybody done a significant analysis to possibly negotiate a split schedule, saying anybody that's not under the pension system or any new hire gets X and the person that gets a pension gets Y? You're just giving $10,000 away to individuals and saying, oh, that'll retain people. It hasn't, and it won't. From education with over 35,000 teachers, it doesn't work that way. There's a little bit more deeper dive that has to be done in order to determine what is there for the employee to stay in that community. Would you rather be a police officer in Greenwich or in Hartford, in West Haven or in Hartford? They're not going there for the money. They may go there for the pension and other possible benefits. What my concern is, you just said we're going to take federal money, throw it against the wall, give everybody a $10,000 increase for using our ARPA money, which you can do, and then have the city pay for it. And then when the state takes you over again, and you say, oh, well, we're losing our police force, what happened to the $10,000? There's no well thought out plan that I see to retain and recruit new police officers. They say I'm leaving because of money. I get it. Well, then address that issue for those new recruits and new hires. What you've done is give away money that could be used at the front end and given it to the people that are not leaving and are already retired. I hate to get so emotional about it, but I've seen it year after year, 35 years in the business. People eat their young. That's why the young leave. And you have to start thinking about what the future looks like and will look like for the young person that wants to be a police officer in West Haven under a salary schedule for them that makes sense. I'm all for salary increases for the West Haven Police. I recognize they're the lowest in the unit. Somebody has to be lowest. As I said, the lowest because of the situation in West Haven regarding the whole host of issues you've had and do have, but I'm just not convinced that a $10,000 salary increase to the world is going to retain long-term your employees. I just don't see it, but that's my own personal opinion. I would hope to see, and you're not obligated to do it. You're doing it because you're under threat of losing 2 people who say, I'm going to leave unless you give me $10,000. Police commission, of course the police commission is going to say, just like the fire commission. I'm still waiting for the fire commission to come up with one singular financial advisor. We asked for that 4 years ago. That hasn't happened. So I guess the frustration is boiling over with me on these issues, but nonetheless, I would vote for any comprehensive plan that increases the salaries to recruit and retain new hires. And I'm just not convinced that this is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. White is next.
Thank you. I think there's a separate agenda item on the police contract.
Yes.
I think we really should finish the 5-year plan and the budget. On the 5-year plan, I think this board has to figure out what appropriate fund balances are going forward. My understanding is 5% is a bare minimum. This predicts, before any allocation for substantial capital expenditure financing in the outer years is barely at 5-6%. And my suspicion is that's going to go down in the out years when they figure in debt service. So I think we need to put a stake in the ground on where they should be, and it's going to be a lot more than 5%. So I think the existing budget, the existing 5-year plan is deficient, in addition to the other reasons we've heard, because they are not aggressive enough on the on the general fund. The other thing is, I note I'm a little confused, is that the proposed changes to the budget said to increase fund balance by $1.3 million, or by 732 to $1.3 million, but I don't see any surplus in FY22. I don't see any increase FY22. I do see $1.8 million in FY23. And then there's something about an adjustment for the police, and but in any event, I think that we should put a stake in the ground as to the fund balance going forward, and help them encourage the budget to meet that. And I think there's more cutting to do, and I think we ought to talk about the police when we get to it on the agenda.
Okay. I just want to piggyback off of you, Mr. White, on your comments on the fund balance. I do agree with you. I do realize that their fund balance has gone off the mark of the prior year 5-year plans, which did get us up to just shy of 6%. It was 5.96% in the prior plans for FY25. And then in FY26, they were at a solid 6%. So if they had leveled that off and then get to FY27 with the 6.77, I do see that as progression. But also, I would ask that this board then takes a look at a fund balance policy, where they don't fall below a specific fund balance and end up in this situation so that they can have a rainy day fund.
Yeah, I just one quick thing that I think that as we think about, and it's a little early, when they get out of Tier 4 supervision, if they do, you know, what's the goal? At this point, they're barely over the 5% in 4 years. So, you know, I don't know about other people, how much time they want to put into this, but, you know, I think we've got to say what it should be and when it should be. And the bottom line, in my view, is it's got to be a lot more aggressive than it is. Thank you.
Christine, I think you were next.
Thank you, Ms. Kennison. And just to pick up on the points that both you and Mr. White made, I do think it's important to have benchmarks and a clear set of expectations around how it is the city can move out of Tier 4 designation. I think it's been said many times over the last several years, both in the context of West Haven and other cities under MARB oversight, that the goal is to get them to independence. And so if we have some, you know, criteria for that progression toward independence, I think that will be helpful in terms of level setting and making clear what the goalposts are for the city and for all of us on the board.
Agree. I don't know who was next, whether it was Stephen or I'm guessing that it is you, Patrick, on the side, because I can't see your name. Hold on, let me check. Yeah. Stephen.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Hi. Well, you know, I think I agree with Mr. White. I think we have to have firm goals. But as you look at the fund balance, we already have established that 6.77 doesn't have any debt applied. So what that 6.77 really is, I'm not really too sure. But getting back to what Mr. Waxenberg said about the police contract, and I do have a little bit of experience with police contracts and retention. If I remember correctly, they were short 5 people out of 105 or 100. Is that what your police staffing is? I think you have 105. Am I correct, Mayor?
It's 120, correct?
120, and you're missing 5.
It's 120, but if there were a plane crash in West Haven and the chief had to send every badge he could to the site, it would be 93.
So you're telling me that you are short that many? How many have left, and how many are on leave for injury or something else? So how many do you have at this point? Of certainly more than 93, right?
Correct.
Some have to be on leave for one reason or another.
We have several on injury. Do you want
to
speak to it?
Just a ballpark. I mean, you got a pretty good idea.
Ballpark, we're probably at about maybe 115.
Okay. So you have 115.
That's counting people that are in the academy that are out injured, etc.
Okay, so you got 115 out of 120. So you're really, and you never have full staffing. It's just someone's always, you know, you always have that issue. How many people do you have at the academy right now?
4.
So you have 4 at the academy. So again, you're really talking about 5 or 6 people, and you're telling me that 2 more people have left. That $10,000 is unilaterally given to everybody. I think that has to really be looked at. And if your issue is retention, I think there's different ways to retain people. At least it's been from my experience. Maybe instead of just unilaterally giving everybody the 10,000, you get a signing bonus, or you make it in 5-year increments that someone gets a percentage of their salary if they stay for 5 years, 10 years, 15, and so on and so forth as you go forward up to, say, retirement, 20 or 20 years, say. So that's my suggestion. How you and I've said this before, so this isn't anything new, but that also gives you the ability from a financial standpoint. You know exactly how many people you have, when they're hired, how long they're staying, and you can budget your police budget accordingly on those particular people every 5, 10, 15, up to 20 years. You know exactly what your percentage increase is going to be. And it's a lot easier to budget for that. But to give $10,000 across the board and as Mr. Waxenberg said, to just kind of take these funds and throw it at the wall and see what sticks, I don't think I could coin a phrase any better. So I think that's something that really needs to be analyzed before we start, at least before I vote for something like that.
We did do a lot of thought before we came up with that, and that brings.
Point of order. Point of order. The chair hasn't called on any non-member to address Mr. Falsigno.
Thank you, Patrick.
I concluded my statement.
Kim, this is Tom Hamilton. I wanted to go back to the fund balance. If I'm on the phone, so I can't see whose hands up. But.
Okay, I apologize, Tom. We do have also somebody. We have Patrick waiting because his hand was up, so I apologize.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Stephen, you finished, right?
I did. I'm sorry. Let me
Okay,
take my hand
thank you.
down. I apologize.
Okay, nope, you're fine.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to get through this and we can move on to the police contract as the agenda dictates. With that said, a couple of things that I have concerns with. You know, some of the projections here, like the havens, you know, that's been ongoing for a number of years. And I just, even though it is pushed out several years out, I just am not as confident in it as the city leadership is. Number one. Number two is getting back to the MOA regarding reimbursing the state taxpayers for the money that is proposed to be laid out to bring in folks to help move the city forward. A couple points of concern. I want to say that when it was kind of moderately discussed, that the actual timeline was talked about over a 4-year period of payback, and that was, I believe, stated by Secretary Beckham. To that degree, going to the fund balance, I think part of that, and we haven't seen this MOA that's been presented to the council, have we?
Yes, it was shared. It was shared at the last meeting, and Secretary Beckham is the one who approved for us to move forward with finalizing it and getting it off. And I believe it was with the blessing of this board. But he is not here, so I do not want to speak on his behalf.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody recalled voting on at least a MOA that was presented to us. With that said, I do recall, not in any document, but in discussion, that there was a point made about that, and I don't know if this is in the MOA, that the payback to us would occur as long as it didn't infringe or drop them below a 5% fund balance.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that, you know, leaves me a little bit of some concern with that, because I know it was up on the board, whatever the fund balance was going out for this year and next year, it was, I believe, below 5%. Am I correct?
Correct. And remember, we just received this final information a day or two ago. I will tell you that the original alignment of the prior 5-year plan did state in fiscal year 2023 that they would have met the 5% if they stayed on plan.
Right. So
okay.
So go ahead.
That's the differences, Patrick.
Okay. So, I mean, to me, I have an issue with it because I think, part of the, reimbursing us for money that we laid out, since we've already laid out 16 million, that we have to lay out due to the continued inefficiencies in the city, to now the way it looks, at least under the new 5-year plan, that wouldn't even start to be considered. And that's assuming this thing doesn't change, that everything goes right, would even be considered until fiscal 25. Okay, and then to whatever degree it would be considered, as far as a payback goes. But I would like, so I have an overall issue with the 5-year plan for many reasons that have been discussed by my colleagues on the board. But I would like, maybe if Julian could get me some clarification, if there was a vote on an MOA regarding the payback of state funds on his earliest convenience.
We'll get back to all the members, and take it back with the secretary as he asked us to move forward.
I'm done.
Thank you, Patrick.
Can I jump
Yes.
in?
Yes, Tom.
Okay, thank you. So I did want to follow up on Mr. White's fund balance comments. I agree that this board should establish some guidelines and some expectations. I see 5% really as being a minimum fund balance. I do believe that we should be requiring the city to come up with a formal written fund balance policy. Probably can't be completed, in time for next week's meeting, but I'd like to see something put together quickly. I do believe that 5% should be a minimum. I would be interested in some sort of range of fund balance provided for under a policy. I would look at the median fund balance levels for other single A rated municipalities. I think West Haven, absent its financial difficulties and deficiencies that we're also familiar with, I think that West Haven really should be a solid single A rated community, and or even a half a notch above that. So I would look to see what the median of other single A municipalities in Connecticut is, and key into that as being an appropriate benchmark. It might be somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the 8 or 10% range. So in any event, I think we should put that on the radar, and that should be part of ultimately really should be part of the expectation of where West Haven gets to under its 5-year plan.
Thank you, Tom. I agree with you. All right. Any other questions from the board members on this 5-year plan and the items they're missing and the things that we would like provided to us before next week's meeting? Julian, did we miss anything? I do not want to forget you.
I don't think anything was missed per se, but at some point before we adjourn, I just want to go back and make sure that we have a complete list of what it is the subcommittee is looking for. The fund balance revision, obviously, but
Yep.
I'll have to go back through my notes and see what I can pick up.
Okay. And I do have some of those, and if not, we can have somebody extract from this tape. But it would be important that we get what everybody is looking for the next meeting. Excuse me.
Right, and so there, a lot of the conversation kind of overlapped with other agenda items. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear and the city's clear on what needs to be changed for 5-year planning purposes and some of the other issues. Again, they clearly overlap, but
I agree. Yep. Understand. Do you want to do that right at this moment before we move on to other topic items to make sure everybody has it for the 5-year plan at least? I do see Christine's hands up.
Right, Ms. Kinnison, just to be clear on the process going forward, Mr. Felsigno had raised concerns about the timing of the submission of these documents and the opportunity to really do a deep dive and analyze what's before us. So rather than table this really is an opportunity for us to provide direction on the additional information that will be available for the full MARB meeting when we next meet, correct? So it's not a matter of us approving or denying or tabling.
No.
It's just scrubbing it so that there can be a fulsome discussion of the entire board.
Agree.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's while we're on this topic, before we move off of this topic, I think it would be important, rather than if we don't get to some agenda items such as number 8, then and being aware of our time, because we're going to run over. We're down to 10 more minutes and our meeting is morphing into taking up all of the time and the details. And I'm not saying it's not important. All of this is important. So I think that it is important that we go through, like Julian had asked, and let's get those topics that you want to make sure that you have for the MARB. And I have some of them written down, and Julian, you probably do, but maybe we can just quickly go through them. Christine, is your hand still up from the same, or you have something else? Okay. Hold on one second. I see somebody else's hand is up before. I just want to make sure. Patrick, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah. So, and I certainly agree with Steve. I think we could certainly delve into some of the things we talked about to refer back to West Haven to correct. But I think, I certainly need just overall more time to review the documents, as I may have some more issues that get raised. As far as the the action of this 5-year plan, I guess we could, I don't know if it would be appropriate to just leave it out there as opposed to
it says possible action. So at this moment, from what I'm hearing from these members, is that we're not going to take action today on the 5-year plan.
Well, certainly it doesn't seem like we're going to take action to approve it for recommendation to the
Right.
full board. So
Correct.
yeah, I just
Correct.
wanted to raise
Correct.
the issue as there may be some more questions that come about as we're able to on our own time a little more in depth review this.
Sure. Can we also then get a timeline so that it's sufficient that we get it back to the city, and then the city can get it back to us, knowing that we normally have a mailing that would go out for next week on what, Monday or Friday, Julian?
Yeah, Friday or Monday. I mean, typically,
Friday,
yeah,
right.
I mean, I'd prefer to do it tomorrow, but I mean,
yeah, right. So
Tomorrow,
it does.
tomorrow's probably unrealistic. These
Right.
documents came 2 days ago. People have commitments, I'm sure, during the day, like most everybody sitting here on this board. So, these are documents that really require certainly more time to review. But I think Friday is unrealistic time. I think Monday would be more appropriate. And whether that works to get it to them and then get it to the board, if it doesn't work, then the full board won't support this.
Well, if it comes available, we will continue to work through these and inform the city.
Perfect.
Okay.
Kim,
Yes.
There's really a process issue here that you're skipping over, which is we owe the city a general fund benchmark and a repayment benchmark. That's on us. And we've got to get it to them before the 15th. And it is 5 of 12. And I don't think anybody has thought about this. We need some information about, benchmarks from others and that kind of thing. So I think we ought to address that. There may be a need for a special committee meeting, on Monday, so that we think about it. This is in addition to other things that we may need. Obviously, the city is going to fill in the CapEx that we know. There was a laundry list of other things. People may, when they get time to go through this, ask about what about. But these two things, which are fairly material, we got to get to them. And how do we do that? When do we do it?
And keep in mind, Mr. White, that this is the 5-year plan. The urgency is going to be the fiscal year 2023 budget. There have been times that we have approved the 2023 budget because we've been comfortable enough with the 2023 and then, the current year, and then we can finish the work of the 5-year plan. That doesn't have to be completed on next Wednesday.
Well, so that means that we're going to live with the.
I'm not saying you're living with it. We have an opportunity. I would say that the focus should be on the fiscal year 2023, making sure that you're solid with 2023, and then we look out.
No, I understand what you're saying,
All right.
but my point is, if you do that, then, and I understand maybe we take it in 2 parts.
Thank you.
But
that's what I'm suggesting.
The way it is, there is no recoupment in 2023, and that we're dealing with a fund balance of 4.8. So okay, if you want to talk about that in the budget,
Yes.
then we can do that. But I think we do need to get back pretty soon, because if you are going out for 4 or 5 years on fund balance, then
I'm in agreement. I am in
got
total
nothing
agreement.
in 03. So I'm going to be in favor of a pretty big boost to fund balance in 23. I'm done.
Any other questions? Comments?
May I ask?
All right. So do we want to go through the list of the items that we wish for them to provide to us?
Hi, Councilwoman O'Connor. I did have a question regarding, No, I can't ask any questions.
She's the board member.
Oh, yes, she's the board member?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't know that your hand was up.
All right,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Point of order. Are the members of the David are members of the full board, not the subcommittees per the statute?
So does that mean I can't ask?
Yeah, this meeting is for the members of the board, for us to ask questions.
Okay.
I would, Ms. Kennison,
I think it might be helpful to hear what the question has to be, please. Thank you.
One of the big concerns of the council is getting out the tax bills. So we were hoping that things would conclude on the 15th. So what do we need? How are we going to accomplish this so that we can get the tax bills out this month?
If the board does not agree, and from now until the 15th, based on the budget, and there is no agreement with the budget that has been provided from the city, the MARB will implement a budget on behalf for the city. That is the requirement of this board, the full board. There will be a budget that will be created. Now, please understand, we do want to approve the city's budget. We don't want to do your budget, okay? We would like to close the gaps on those items and address those items, and let's have the city create their own budget and fill those missing items. I think that everybody would understand to come forward and provide a 5-year plan that is missing some very alarming items, such as your debt. We need to have that information. We need to have that information. And also the choice of changing your budget for this year and coming off of the 5-year plan. What is the reason for doing that? And also you're putting the funds back into fund balance for this year is a reduction from what was previously proposed to us, and in a 5-year, not proposed, it was actually approved 5-year plan. You're coming off that mark. So in your very first year, you're already coming off the mark, which means that those benchmarks need to be met, the original ones. And so then I would suggest that what would happen is, if we can't get to that point where we have a budget that is approved, similar to what has happened once before, that the city then had to send out initial bills to the folks, knowing that if the budget got approved after the fact, there would be a revision that would have to be done if it impacted the mill rate. So I think it's beneficial that we get to the point we are provided with the information that is needed. And some of this was provided in the past, but it's not coming together now.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Can we get to creating a list of those items that we are looking for on this plan? So that Julian knows what he's looking for. Because we're at 12 o'clock and we still have 2 other items, and I know some of that has already been touched upon. So some of these items that are on the list has already been touched upon. But we probably do want to have a little bit more discussion regarding the 5-year plan. Okay, I think that the city should take a look at the overall budget and take a look at the fund balance that is being put into play. You've heard that message today. And getting closer to the mark of where you were in the past with your fund balance of your prior 5-year plans. And if there is no means or way that you can do that, I would have a very good reason and an explanation as to why, and how are you going to catch up and get back there again. The capital plan needs to be included in this 5-year plan with the debt. Detailed information about the debt and the layering. We heard from Mr. Hamilton of saying what the capital projects are, how much is the debt. There was a 4-page schedule that was provided in the past on the 5-year plan. We need to have that included again. City, are you taking notes of this, Mayor?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else that can take a look at their list? And I would like to know if you have any other positions that you are looking for in the out years, because I don't think that there were any new positions, at least it wasn't discussed. I think a list of assumptions of what these assumptions are in a summary, very quickly, similar to how you have your dollars in here for your table. Tell us what the assumptions, maybe there's an assumption page that you insert and say, here's what my assumptions are for the salary increases and all of that, so that this way it's not verbal, it's written. We already have the confirmation about the Board of Ed. Did we want anything further on the Board of Ed? Mr. White?
I was fine on that.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. But wanted to make sure I have it written down. And I was fine with it.
I commend them for doing that.
Yep.
Good.
Yep, I agree. And we
You
talked
already
about the
mentioned the
new,
fund balance, right?
I did talk about the
With
fund balance
with the debt service.
with the debt service. Ms. Shaw, did you want something more about the revenue growth where you said that it went from an explanation between the 0.5% that went all the way up to the increase in 25, right? Maybe that's listed in the assumptions.
If that is something that could be explicitly laid out, I think that would be helpful to others reviewing this because it stand out, but I am satisfied with the explanation that was offered today.
Okay. Thank you. What about the out year with the project on the Havens project? Do you need anything on that? I heard from yourself, what that was the explanation, and we also heard from Mr. Egan.
And Julian had raised the point about, the impact. I believe there was a spike because of a change in the motor vehicle tax. I'm not sure. I think Julian had addressed what was a spike in the mill rate, which accounted for an increase in the tax revenues.
Julian, you okay with what you need there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the mill rates explained
Okay.
the revenue, the tax
okay.
revenue increase.
Okay. You don't recall anything more on that end?
No.
Okay. Mr. Waxenberg asked for a table on a 5-year plan that has maybe not. Do you recall that, City? Mayor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
muted there for a while.
Okay.
But yes,
That-
you're
you
exactly
asked-
right.
Okay, you asked for that table
Yes.
to be updated. You also asked about the fund balance. I have that written down. And you wanted an
Yeah, and-
explanation on the prior fund balance and what were the driving factors for the prior year trend from 1990 to 2020 of the deficit. What were the triggers?
Yeah, if there's anybody still around that can
Explain that.
talk. Yeah.
The next item I have for you is it had to do with the contract and I don't know if there was anything else. Oh yes, there is something. You wanted to know about a table that would have each person's salary, not their name, and you would have the dollar amount and the percentage amount in 2 different columns. So you can see that comparison. And
Yes,
the
correct.
impact going out 5 years based on this new contract and the impact on the active employees versus the retirees.
Yes. Yeah.
Do I have all of that?
Yeah, the retirees are tiered, so.
Yep.
And also, Kim, I don't know if they would get a legal opinion, but the question of that $10,000 for the tier, let's call it the tier 2 retiree, where their
Okay.
COLA is based on the percentage of what they call the GWI.
Okay.
Is the $10,000 considered as part of the GWI for the purposes of the COLA increases for that group of retirees? I think you need a legal opinion on that.
Okay. Scott, you have that?
Got it.
Thank you. You also wanted a trend analysis, Mark, of the partnership plan, and I think it was the prior 5 years back on what the rate increases were.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you can project what the, yes,
What going forward should be.
yes.
Okay. Did you want to know something about the Board of Ed surplus coming forth this year being the 2 million? Right now, all surpluses for fiscal year 21 and 22 are just a proposal because the audits have not been completed. So FY21, there is no audit. So whatever number they're talking about, it's not concrete. It's still
Yeah, no,
soft numbers.
No, Scott has
Okay.
explained it well with his conversation. I'm fine.
So we're good there. Okay, thank you. Do you want any? Yes.
Sorry. I'll go through your list because I have another, I'll add to the end.
Do you have, Mark, did you ask for anything more about the conversation that you had about the contract, the police contract, and you were satisfied about them stating that it was okay to use ARPA dollars? You were uncomfortable with the fact that you think that we don't know of another city that has used ARPA dollars for the base budget. We did receive a legal opinion, but is there anything more that you're asking for in that category? I didn't mark it.
No, I think it is legal. The question I had was, is anybody aware of any other town that is using ARPA funds for this purpose? And I think the answer is nobody's aware. So I'm fine with that.
Okay. Did you want any other work completed in regards to the retirees versus the new, you were looking for a plan, I think, to address the new hires versus the retirees in relationship to the contract?
I'm okay with the existing contract language. I think it's I'm fine. I mean, I know what the pension benefits are for those tiers. The discussion really, which is for a later date, is how do you retain, and as the mayor is concerned, how do you recruit and retain? And I think that's a discussion that needs to have more depth to it.
Okay. And a plan.
Absolutely.
Okay. The goal on the fund balance that you heard from us was not only that the 5%, which was the original goal of the 5-year plan, but it was also to strive that the 5% is the minimum. And Mr. Hamilton had asked that we start to think about having a 5-year plan, which would also incorporate higher levels of fund balance and possibly a range within a fund balance policy for consideration. Now, I know you're not going to get a policy completed by next week, but at least just start to think about this and brainstorm about this when we come back to the topic of the 5-year plan. We're going to try to focus on the fiscal year 2023 for next week. Even though the 5-year plan is there, we have to get solid first with 2023. And continue to have good discussions about the rest of that so we can move towards that. I also heard that we're looking for some benchmarks and some goals. And you were looking for the MARB to create that as we discussed it. Mr. White and Mr. Falsigno.
Yeah, that's right. I think
but I don't know if it should hold up a 5-year plan. It could keep the plan moving, and that could be the work that we work on up in the upcoming year.
Yeah, I mean, if staff can dig up, as Tom said, whether what do you do for single A? Now, if we can get some benchmarks that we can talk about at the next meeting, which would probably be preliminary, but I think you have to set 23 based on some idea of where you're going. That the old plan was at 5.3%.
Correct.
Is that enough? I don't think it is. So that will be the discussion within the budget, and then we can flush it out later. But if the bogey is 9%, then over 4 years, then maybe we take another look at 23. So anyway.
Well, my goal is to get through 23 by next week so that it is a city budget. I would be happy, and I guess it would be helpful to hear feedback from these members. Would you be happy if with a benchmark of 5.3 to get back on the mark of the original plan of where we were, or something in a range in that area?
For me, it would be higher. It would be in the fives, but it would be more than 5.3.
And from my perspective, I think we just need to, I'm in favor of some flexibility. There may be a need for higher than 5.3 in the short term, and kind of, but over a 5-year, smoothed average, I think that the goal is 5.
Okay, thank you. I'm in favor of that. Mr. Hamilton, what are your thoughts on this? Because you did speak about it. Do I still have you?
Are we talking about the fund balance?
We are talking about the fund balance for FY23, because I think it would be helpful for them to understand. My goal is to try to, at least at a minimum, get back to where they were in their original 5-year plan.
So Patty, and my thoughts are this. I think that they should be back to that at least as a minimum, but incorporated enough in there where they can start paying back the money if we, so choose, if it goes to them for the extra personnel that's been added. And I think furthermore, I know I asked Julian to follow up. I'd like to discuss further, and this may just be, a discussion amongst the board as far as the payback of that. Because if it's one, I've seen no document that said the payback time. I saw the draft that Julian sent out on May 16th, that just talked about the lending of the restructuring funds, or the giving of the restructuring funds. And it was at that meeting that followed that we talked about it actually being paid back. A 10-year timeline was not what was discussed, and I certainly would be not in agreement with it being 10 years. And I think the fund balance, whatever our target is, needs to be budgeted to incorporate enough money there to pay back the state taxpayer.
Okay, we are going to make a note to that, and we're going to get back to you on that one. That's the work of the OPM staff. Yes, Tom. Hello, I get to see you now.
Yeah, I'm back. I was listening, but I seem to have lost my mic on the telephone for some reason. So, but anyway, I think we need to have a little bit of flexibility on the fund balance. I'm most concerned with the overall direction of fund balance, and within a reasonable period of time, getting at least at 5% and over 5% ideally. Again, I would look at the median of AAAs as being the
Sure.
long-term objective. By long-term, I mean, over the next, say, 5 years, trying to get up to the median of other AAAs. But, if we're at, the same number we were projecting in the last 5-year plan, it sounded like 5.3% for next year's budget. If we get to 5.3%, I could support that budget.
Thank you.
And again, I think the biggest issue for me on the 5-year plan really is the debt service that we've talked
Yes.
about. I think that absolutely has to be addressed.
Yep.
I hear what Patrick and others are saying about the payment of the funds that are incurred by the MARB, but I'm satisfied with whatever direction really the secretary gives us on that. I'm happy to get behind.
Okay, thank you. And we'll have that discussion on Wednesday. If I don't get a memo out to you beforehand, myself or Julian. That is
my understanding on, sorry for interrupting, but my understanding is that the council is going to vote on the MOA tomorrow.
Monday.
Monday? Okay.
Monday, not tomorrow.
Monday.
Monday, the 13th,
Monday.
it's on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
I just think that means
Yep.
that
We will
the
get back
MARB
to him.
needs to move on that. It's not fair to the city.
Understand.
Since we're creating
That's
such a
that's my list. I have made, that's all of my notes. So whatever I've missed, now is your time to please help me out here.
Since we have such an extensive list, I did want to just clarify from my own mind, to the extent that the city has to repay any disallowed expenses, that we discovered as a result of the forensic audit, as well as any other, let's just say, concerns that the audit may uncover. What would be the source of those funds for repayment? Would that come out of fund balance? Is there a contingency for that? Because those amounts already, given what we know, are fairly significant.
We do have an unallocated contingency account that we carry year by year.
And what are the funds available on that line item?
I think we have 600,000 in, something like that.
So if the numbers hold for the observations of the forensic audit, already those funds would be depleted because the disallowed expenses exceed that. So ought that be another item added to the list?
Yes.
600 this year, 600 next year, 400.
That being said, we continue to be in contact with Cone Resnick. They provided an auditing sample for some of the things that they indicated might be disallowed. And so I will give you an example. One of them is the purchase of N95 masks. It's hard for me to conceptualize a reason why in 1990 we would have bought N95 masks. Some of those items are things like building fogging, which we wouldn't have done pre-COVID. So I think that number is going to float.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Kim, Patty, and I'd also like just a little more clarification on the Havens project and how they get to their determinations that these things will, completion dates and whatnot.
Okay. One other thing that I recalled when we talked about staffing, I wasn't sure if we had put in the budget for all of the grant positions that were needed based on ARPA and based on the large number of grants. So grant is one area that would I want to make sure that you have proper staffing for. I do recall accounts payable is an area that I know once we get somebody to do a full assessment, there will be some areas that positions might be identified. So if you don't have a cushion or aware that you need expertise in those areas, some of that has already come forth in the forensic audit as well as your regular ongoing prior audits. So I would make sure that your staffing and finances up to par and maybe have a contingent. If you have no additional added positions. I think that is it. Any other questions or things that we would like to add? Julian?
Yes.
Anything else that you can recall that we might have missed?
No.
Okay. All right. Speak now, folks, if you do. Now, we're at 12:23. How much further do we want to go on this agenda for today?
I have to jump off, Kim. I'm sorry.
Okay, Stephen.
Yeah, I think
I was
that
just gonna, go ahead. Sorry.
we ought to, I mean, I think to some extent what you just did has pointed to changes to the budget for
Yes.
23.
Yes.
Some ARPA money, a bump on the, you know, something in the neighborhood of 5.3 of the higher number on expenditures. So I think you've got a number, you know, the CRF contingency, I think you've got there. So we can, I guess, take no action on the budget we made recommended so that they have something to work with. And ideally they go to the council and come back. And the final on the police contract, you know, when we get there, I think we probably need some discussion about what happens if we reject it, which is what I'm inclined to do, on the notion that we support the city in trying to retain officers. We don't think this is the way to do it. It's just, as Mark has said on several occasions, we're just throwing 10,000 at them. There'd be a willingness to renegotiate that. Whether the union is willing to renegotiate or not, we don't know. But in terms of this meeting, I think we would reject. I haven't really thought about the legal consequences of the fact that this contract was not presented to us in time to act, and who was responsible for that, and what liability they may have for doing that. But in any event, I think that I would suggest when we get to that we say we reject it, and then I think we're done for today. And
why not take no action on it?
Yeah, if I might, from a legal perspective, rejection puts you in a whole different legal
Right.
category, whether just let it sit.
I would rather take no action.
Yeah, if I might briefly, because I know
Yes.
time is of the essence, and the mayor's still on the line. I think it's fairly obvious that there is a hesitancy from the MARB to agree to this contract, or reopener, I'll call it, as you've proposed it. And you said time is of the essence. Well, you know, the new contract is in existence. I would ask you, and this is personal, I'm not speaking for anybody other than myself. In the past, this board has approved MOUs, memorandums of understanding, for the year that a contract is already in existence to do certain things, whether it's a salary increase, whether it's a health insurance change or whatever, and then let the normal negotiations take place to enhance, to do deeper dives over its normal historical purposes. I would ask, and I thought I did the last meeting, but apparently maybe not clearly, for the mayor to consider, along with folks in West Haven, to consider how, I have personally no objection to creating some sort of a recruitment and retention, as Pat explained, bonus concept for a certain category of individuals that the mayor has and the commission has deemed willing to leave due to quote unquote salary. So instead of saying I got 107 employees, I want to give them all a lot of money, breaking down the 107 into how many are first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, and where do you want to try to retain those individuals, and through an MOU for 1 year only, in a bonus concept. Even talk to the recruits and see if that's enough for them to agree to, as well as the union, and sign a contract to that extent for next year, and then continue with your normal negotiations process to advance more structural changes that would create a long-term solution to the problems that exist. But that's my own personal suggestion. But as I see it, I agree with Kim. No action is better than any action. But should action be required, which it's not, I think it's the sense that I'm getting that it would unfortunately not pass. So I'm just offering that as a concept for folks and more statement to consider. The mayor said she's aware of 2 individuals that would leave if they didn't get the quote unquote raise. Well, look at the individuals and categorize them, and maybe that's the group you need to address rather than 100 and some odd employees.
Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, I find myself in sort of a rather odd position in that I'm actually more supportive of this proposal than many of the other board members, I think, are. And I think I'm struggling still, frankly, with whether I vote in favor of it or not. I think that they made a pretty good case that the pay range for their police officers in West Haven is really at the bottom of the barrel, and it is below the other, the surrounding communities and the communities that they're competing with. So I do think that they have made a reasonable case that the actual rate of pay over the course of the years has in fact fallen behind, is not terribly competitive. On the other hand, I don't think that the evidence they presented so far in terms of their turnover and vacancy rate and so forth was actually all that compelling, because as been referred to earlier, the total number of vacancies is actually not out of line with what many other organizations, both police departments and non-police agencies, are experiencing these days. And I generally agree with the concept that that this is a rather blunt instrument they're using. It is a bit of kind of throwing money at the wall and hoping that it has desired impact in terms of retention and recruitment. And I accept Mr. Waxenberg's comments and other board members who've suggested that there are more targeted ways to go about this that could have been devised. But be that as it may, I'm still on the fence a bit and eager to hear other board members to see whether or not they have any appetite or interest in voting in favor of this. And again, the reason I would tend, at least to some degree, to say I could get behind it is because of the fact that I do think they've presented pretty good evidence that that their pay range is definitely on the low side compared to their competition.
Christine?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree that but it's not the way to solve the problem, I don't think.
So to add my voice to the choir here, excuse me a second. I appreciate Mr. Waxenberg's kind of very surgical observations about opportunities to really kind of address more neatly some of the challenges around retention. I've taken the position in the past, and I'm inclined to continue to stick with this position, that the presumption, in my view, is in favor of those who are at the negotiating table. When I considered the issues with the police contract when it was last presented, the procedural weaknesses that Mr. White pointed out are very concerning. The fact that there was no clear path for how the negotiated increases would be paid for in the budget and/or 5-year plan, that was of great concern as well. And so I do believe that the appropriate course is for the board to table the contract at this time. I am not commenting on the substance of the matters negotiated in that contract. I think the retention issue is a very significant one. I suspect that there are a lot of different approaches to address those retention challenges, and I'm not really well versed enough in the alternatives. And that's why I give great deference to my colleagues on this committee who have been at negotiating tables. But I think that the appropriate action for us now is to take no action because the broader issues around the funding remain unresolved. So that's a punt.
No, I agree with you, Christine. Thank you. Mr. White. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I
Sorry,
think-
Pat, I didn't see you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, one of the things, I'll be short. One of the things that I think some of the board members are not addressing, they're kind of renegotiating the deal, is that it may be that the parties have said, this MOA is the deal. And the question to the board is, do you approve it? And someone said, well, I'll approve this. You know, the raise may make sense, but this retention doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, I think it sounds like, according to, you know, Scott Jackson, that they have addressed the payment in the outgoing years, whether they can, you know, fix it with the, you know, by leaving out the CapEx, it makes it easy to pay in the out years. But, you know, they might be able to fix that. But you've got to, when you vote, it's going to be all or nothing. And I'm trying to create a third option of sending it back to the negotiating table with maybe some guidance, because I agree with you, Christine, that you know, 2.5% wage increase, you know, that doesn't set me on fire. So, but it's the just $1.2 million. Here it is, right in the middle. They haven't made fund balance. They're doing it's. I'm not sure what's behind all this. You know, as Mark said, that, you know, why didn't you just do an interim? And so I don't understand all the background, but I just want people to understand that it's all or nothing. And when we vote, and if people want to punt, you know, that's better than approving it. So
if I might, you're not required to vote because there's no time limit contract here. I think the commissioner the last time said that there's a contract in existence and this can sit. If you vote no, it'll go to it goes back for both, the way I understand the law after reading it. It goes back for both parties to come back within 10 days, then it goes to arbitration, et cetera, et cetera. So I prefer not to have the legal process take over where you end up with something that you didn't want, but that is imposed by binding arbitration when it's not needed. Technically speaking, both parties decided, for whatever reason, to enter into a voluntary agreement. This is not mandated by statute, but once you go into the voluntary agreement, you now are in statutory guidance and rules and regs. For this board to reject would place another statutory domino effect that could come back to bite the town in the behind and this board. But to just using Christine's terms, punting is fine because you already have they already have a contract. They already have a contract in existence, and I agree with Tom. They are at the bottom of the barrel. Somebody will be at the bottom of the barrel. It's the way it is. As I said, it's a self-induced wound, but that in it of itself shouldn't prevent both parties from sitting down and negotiate. How do we get out of this mess with a new way of doing business regarding our compensation system? I mean, I, off the top of my head, have done this 5 or 6 times where management has created, along with the unions, created incentives for new hires and existing hires with below a certain level of years to retain them and to attract them. That has not been done. So I guess my perspective, Bob, is by rejection, you basically are throwing it into the hands of the legal process, and I'm not sure you want to do that. I'd much rather see if they are willing to have an MOU for a year to deal with the as they call it, I'm calling it a crisis that they appear to have, which they can do with our funds, and then sit down and do the necessary long-term solution to get them out of this last, as Tom said, this last event type thing. Because people are leaving. Hartford's losing at a rate of 10 police officers a month, and they have better salaries and a better pension plan. So what do you think $10,000 is going to do to West Haven? But there are things that can be negotiated, hopefully, other than just a flat 10,000, that could be enticing for a young person out of the academy to make their career in West Haven.
Understand. Thank you, Mark.
That's my opinion.
Pat, you were next, and then we have some others that are asking, I think, to speak one more time.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused on the process here. Are we under the impression that we can let this sit in like purgatory in perpetuity?
No, it will be brought up again at the next meeting.
And what statute is that? What law allows us to continue to be brought up at a next meeting? Personally, I think we've run afoul of the law. I think the West Haven, it was basically, whatever you want to call it, malpractice, gross malfeasance, whatever, that it wasn't brought to our attention when it should have been. To that end, in all fairness to the city and to the police officers of the city, I think this board should certainly recommend an action one way or the other, either vote for it or vote against it. A couple things to point out. This is a reopener on wages. You have a overall collective bargaining agreement in effect. So this is basically just a MOU on wages to reopen them and do that. If it's accepted, great, it moves forward. If it's rejected, then it goes back. I think if, I'd be more willing to get behind it, actually, but if it was rejected, then at least it would give the parties a clear and definitive kind of base to say, okay, well, to the extent that they could go to arbitration, I don't know what the ground rules are. As someone who's negotiated public safety contracts many times on both sides, as a manager and a president of the union, I don't know if the ground rules, if this was a negotiation that if you didn't come to agreement, that there was, you agreed that you wouldn't go to arbitration. If the city reopened a contract when they didn't have to, why they wouldn't have a provision in there that prevented that, I don't know. But, I don't know what the ground rules say. With that said, they can always continue to negotiate when things get sent back to them or rejected. If that was the position of the board, then they could sit back down at the table and maybe with certainly some guidance of then what would be palatable to the majority of the board as far as structure and overall wages, something that, where you don't have, which it seems to be certainly a point of concern, 100 and whatever retirees getting an extra $5,000 grab off the wage, the $10,000 lump sum. But I think it's just patently unfair that I think this was TA'd back in February. It was voted on by both parties around the same time. And now we're in June. So I think there needs to be action taken on it. I disagree with no action being taken on it because it's not the process. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if it is rejected, they can rebargain it. Or maybe the union's just going to challenge the process itself, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I'd recommend trying to figure something out. But I think there needs to be some action taken, certainly at the full board meeting coming up next week, with guidance from what we feel as members of the subcommittee.
It's a tier 4. West Haven's a tier 4 community. It's a separate set of standards.
And the subcommittee, we just make a recommendation to the full MARB. There have been many times that the contracts have gone directly to the full MARB rather than a recommendation from the subcommittee.
Correct, but as a
Okay.
member of the subcommittee, I don't know why we wouldn't be making a recommendation one way or the other. But if that's the case, then, you know, I think we have some differing views on this. So we can, does this mean this is going forward? This is going forward. The contract that's before us now is going to go forward to the full board with just no recommendation?
West, if I might, Hartford is coming to the board with no recommendation from the Hartford subcommittee because we didn't have the proper documentation.
Mhm.
And that's on the full agenda for next Wednesday.
Because we wanted additional information.
Right, but that's not where we're at here. So what is the action by taking no action? This contract that's before us is going to be on the agenda for the full MARB meeting on the 15th?
Yes.
Okay. So it will be voted on by the MARB on the 15th.
It will be put on the agenda.
Okay, so if it's not voted on by the MARB, that means that we didn't take action. And does that mean that it just goes into full effect since we didn't take action? And under the statute, even though to me, you know, like I said, I think we've blown this. I think the agreement between the union and the city of West Haven is legal and binding. And since it was the timeline of the 44 days expired prior to them entering tier 4, but to that end, I guess in our own world of making the rules, if it's not voted on, if we take no action, just as we've taken no action on other contracts and under statute, they become effective. Since the bargaining unit voted in affirmative in this, the council didn't reject it, they voted affirmative. If we take no action, that is viewed on putting the timeline aside as an affirmative vote. That's what the way the statute reads. So does that mean if we take no action?
No.
It's not accurate. You'd have to vote to take no position.
Yeah, that's what I just said. If there's no action taken, if it's not voted on.
No, you'd have to take a vote of no position.
Actually, you don't have to take a vote, Mark. You don't have to take a vote. If you don't take action within the 44 days, okay, putting the timeline aside, since it's totally past it, if you don't take action within the 44 days, pretend the 15th is the 44th day, okay? If you don't take action, the SBLR has recognized hundreds of times that then that agreement is now in effect. Okay,
but
so we don't have to vote to take no position. It's either vote affirmatively, vote in the negative, or you don't take action. The affirmative or no taking action effectuates the agreement. So if we take no action, is the board under the impression that, okay, now it's binding, or are we going to say it's still in purgatory? I just think it's patently unfair to the police officers of West Haven and really to the city. All right.
They have to wait till the next meeting anyways, because our vote is not the carrying motion. The vote comes from the full MARB. Okay.
I understand the process. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And I've said that many times.
I know. So
what I'm saying is this, is that if this subcommittee doesn't want to make a recommendation one way or the other, fine. Okay. But then I guess I'll expect action on the 15th, either a no vote, a yes vote, or an affirmative vote. And then my expectation is if it's two of the latter, then I would expect the agreement between the West Haven police officers and the city of West Haven, as written before us now, would be in effect.
It's a different statute for MARB.
Right, and
collective bargaining
under tier 4
been modified. Under tier 4 has been modified. So therefore, it's a separate set of laws that apply to tier 4 municipalities. The normal negotiations under 10-141 or 10-140 or 10-7 not apply for tier 4 municipalities. So I
Right.
understand where Pat's coming from, and you
Understand.
need Garrett. You need Garrett to be at the meeting to clarify what the board's options, quote unquote, are regarding collective bargaining agreements that come before the MARB, tier 4 MARB communities.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mark, it came before the MARB when we were when they were in tier 3.
Well, that's I don't know that. I need a legal. The last.
Yeah,
meeting
I do know. That's why I'm just saying it for the record. It came before tier 3, and the 44 days expired in tier 3. So we can't push out a statute that was not in effect.
I understand that, and the commissioner at the last meeting, if you recall, stated that he is interpreting it as coming before us under tier 4. So that's a legal argument. If they're under tier 3 at the time, one thing. If they're under tier 4, that's another thing. But that's for the legal beagles to decide. But in any event, you still got legal questions regarding the COLA that need to be addressed that I think are going to be discussed, or at least gotten from Scott regarding the how they figure the retiree COLA, which affects the ADEC.
Okay, we've had a lot of discussion about this. And I see that we have Mr. White and we have Mr. Hamilton's hand up.
I'll be very quick. I think that we need a legal opinion before
I agree.
The 15th. And you know, Mark, the union does not agree with your view or Jeff's
Right.
view.
Right.
And number 3, I believe at the last meeting, we, at the suggestion of Chris Hodgson, we did the belt and suspenders, where we said we think this is covered by under the facts of this case under tier 4. If that isn't the case, then we exercise our tier 3 rights to extend the time to, I'm not sure when, it may be the 15th. So to Pat's point, we have to take action on the 15th to reject. Otherwise, it goes into effect unless you cut a deal with the union beforehand who and say, look, we want to redo this with your consent. And it sounds like there's, you know, that the notion of a 2.5% raise is, you know, that's going to go over. It's how you, and the notion of a bonus may very well go over, but not the way it's structured. So maybe voluntarily they would do this, but I just want to tell everyone, I agree with Pat, we have to do something on the 15th. And I know Kim wants to get this meeting over, and just the way to do it is to punt. And I agree on punting to the.
I want to approve the budget first
Make
so
a
that we know that the funding is solid and where we can, that's why it is listed on this agenda to approve the budget first. We are in a solid ground of approving a budget that will then take this contract into consideration.
The budget, it's all ARPA funds, Kim. For
I know that. I know that.
All right. What do we do? Well, Tom's got to speak. I'm done.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Tom, you put your hand down.
Yeah, I pretty much, I think everything I had to say has already been said. So
Okay.
I agree. We need a legal opinion, and
Thank you.
and we can punt for today.
Okay. Mr. Egan, your hand's up still.
No, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Are we finished with all the work that we need to complete for today? I would like to, I think we've already discussed, no, we are not complete. So we have already discussed the 5-year plan. We've in hand, we have discussed the agenda item number 5, which is the budget. And we have also discussed the police contract. There is a next item on the agenda that was revised and just added yesterday. Julian, there is a review and discussion and possible action on a bond ordinance. This is new to me. And I believe legal counsel is with us today from the city to discuss what this is. I know that there are 2 contracts, and one of the contracts has to deal with Dawson Ave, or both of them do. One is for $900,000, and I believe you're getting grant money for it. And the second one is for $1,161,000. Can somebody walk us through these ordinance? Please.
Sure. If you're okay, this is Mike Andriana from Pullman and Connolly, the city's bond counsel.
Hi, Michael.
There's actually 2 ordinances and a financing that need to be discussed today. Let's start with the 2 ordinances. They are ordinances for clean water funding from the state's 2% loan program. These are for sewer installation and manhole cover projects along Dawson Avenue. The way the deal was structured was that the went into 2 contracts. Contract 1, which was $900,000, and contract 2, which I believe is like $1.16 million. Both of these contracts, this type of work with the state is loan only. So it would be the typical, once the work was done, it would be the typical 20-year loan at 2%. These ordinances still need to go to the council, but based on their Tier 4 status, it appeared to me that these ordinances need to be approved by the MARB. So those are the ordinances for Clean Water Fund 225 CSL and Clean Water Fund 226 CSL. In addition, the city is currently has an interim funding obligation with the state, which is effectively a construction loan for the Cove River pump station. That work is complete, and the city is in the middle of working with the state to convert that construction loan to a term loan. Again, 20-year loan at 2%. That loan will be, the project loan, permanent loan would be $3.925 million for the Cove River pump station project. So those are the kind of the 3 clean water fund financings we're talking about today. One is a debt obligation that's just converting from a construction loan to a permanent loan, and the other 2 are ordinances for future financing, which is still scheduled to go to the council, hopefully after we get MARB approval here. All set.
This is the subcommittee, just so you are aware, and
Right.
that full approval is at the MARB, which is next week.
Exactly.
All right. I don't know if I have seen personally enough materials on this item. And again, when did we get this, Julian? Yesterday?
Yes.
And we have on here bond ordinance. Were you aware that it's a bond ordinance plus a loan situation? Because again, I know it's coming at the 9th hour.
If you're asking me,
I am.
no, I mean,
know
it was
okay.
It was communicated that there was this need, and so I put it onto the agenda because it does obviously require MARB approval for bond ordinances, and without having the details and the time to get the details before revising the agenda, saw fit to just put it on, erring on the side of caution. So, and I didn't catch what the deadline. Could you revisit that? The deadline of June 30th, and
Okay.
what is the deadline for the issuance or for the amendment of the agreement with the state?
No. Let's back up because we're talking about couple different things here. And Julian, can I just ask, was the memo that MuniStats put together distributed?
No.
To the MARB group?
It did get an email from bill earlier this morning, but we have not distributed that yet.
Okay.
Haven't looked at it yet.
Okay. That provides a lot of the background, but just to give some information to this subcommittee, the two bond ordinances, there is no deadline really. Those projects are, the only deadline is those projects are queued up. They've gone out for bidding. The city does have the authority, and did have the authority to enter into contracts for those projects. We just need the financing approval at this point. And until we get the financing approval, we can't get the construction loans through the state treasurer's office. So that's the schedule there. The June 30th deadline is for the Clean Water Fund 222 CSL project. That is the project that currently has a construction loan in place. It is the project that the work is done, and the deadline of June 30th is a deadline imposed by the state's Clean Water Fund program through the project loan agreement. The way it works is that the city needs to enter into the term loan by June 30th.
And so is there a separate loan agreement document that we should be seeing? Because we have two bond ordinances.
There's what's called a project loan agreement between the city and the state that's already been signed. That was signed prior to the time, I think it was back in 2018, prior to the time that the city entered into the construction loan for 222 with the state.
All right, I think that we need those materials though, so we can have a clear understanding of what you're asking us for.
Okay.
And if you could have that handy and so that we can get that out to these members.
Sure. Yeah, I can work with the city's financial advisor and we can get a whole package of information.
So this term loan that they have, that you're discussing, was this already built into the 5-year plan, Mayor Rossi?
The mayor's not here, but yes, there are funds available. As I referenced earlier, sewer debt is paid out of the sewer fund. There are sufficient funds available.
Okay.
Kim, I have a question.
Yes, I'm sorry, Tom.
Yeah, I guess in terms of, and we've already, I guess you've already made note of the fact that I don't think we received any of the backup related to that $3.9 million project loan. One of the things I would be interested in is a repayment schedule so that we know, how much that loan is, how much the payments on that loan are going to be, and when the payments start and so forth. So whoever is putting together that backup documentation, if they can make sure there's a repayment schedule. And again, I was interested in the same thing you are in terms of understanding whether or not those amounts had been layered into the 5-year plan. And it sounds like they're coming out of the sewer fund, which is not part of the 5-year plan, I think.
Right.
But a little clarification on exactly how much that is and where it's being paid for would be helpful.
Yeah, and just for point of just clarity for the subcommittee, all of the recent Clean Water Fund projects of the city are now paid directly out of the sewer fund.